Well, it's been a big week in politics. The House is sitting in Canberra. The Prime Minister has flown to Asia for several conferences. Yesterday, the Reserve Bank announced it will hold the cash rate steady this month. And today, the latest national account figures were released by Treasury. Joining me to get the latest on all this is Sky News Political Editor Andrew Clennell. Andrew, welcome. Now, pressure is on the government this week as questions mount about that $3.6 million that Defence Minister Richard Marles has spent on VIP flights in the past year alone. And yesterday, the Greens and the Coalition teamed up in the Senate to order the release of relevant documents. Tell me about these reports that he used AFP security for a private golf trip. Surely not.
Well, I think all he's said is he's had golf trips with various ministers, etc. We'll get all the detail through this production of documents, you'd hope, and I think that's in the minister's interest, frankly, if he's prepared to defend all that travel. It is a lot of travel. We spent a lot of time as acting PM, of course, because Anthony Albanese's been away for a fair period. But the opposition tried to ask him, did you have your golf clubs? I think he carries them everywhere, though. That's the issue. And he like I said, in Cambodia, he played them with foreign ministers. So, you know, I think it doesn't really pass the pub test. People aren't that big on his use of VIP travel. And it sort of feeds into the Qatar Airways issue as well. People thinking, I can't afford to fly and you're flying absolutely everywhere on VIP aircraft, never going commercial. So it kind of feeds into that story, that narrative, that unhappiness with voters at the moment.
Oh, absolutely. Particularly if he's flying into Avalon using those jets to fly into Avalon so he can be a little bit closer to his home than if you flew into Tullamarine on a commercial plane. Again, like you said, that does not pass the pub test at all. Now let's go to the latest national account figures that were released this morning. The economy continued to slow through the year to June, with annual growth dropping to 2.1% from 2.3% in March. After accounting for the bounce in immigration, the real GDP on a per capita basis actually dropped by 0.3%. Andrew, we're in a per capita recession. Tell my audience what that means, and are things going to get better or worse?
I was worried you were going to ask me that because I'm confused by it as well. That's the first time I've heard of a per capita recession today. But I think it basically means as people come in, it's the economy's through migration, which of course stopped during COVID. The economy's not growing in comparison, but in terms of the actual growth of the economy, we're not in a recession. Look, I think if there is some good news out of this, I think you could say goodbye to any more rate rises because the economy is slowing. I think there's hope out of this figure that will avoid a technical recession. But it does show that people are doing it tough. The other saving grace for the government, I have to say, is the low unemployment figure of around 3.7%. I mean, it's unheard of. As long as the slowing of the economy doesn't lead to that unemployment rate going to 5 or 6%, I think we could be in far worse straits. I mean, look, I was around. I was at university, I think, and working in the early 90s when it was 11%. And look, we're nothing on that, are we? No, we're nothing on the situation we had in COVID where the economy stopped. I think the biggest thing by far, to state the bleeding obvious to you, Rita, is the cost of living, right? So the cost of living is what's killing people at the moment, and housing affordability and rent affordability. It
is, and I think that's why that per capita figure matters, because of course you're going to have this bump because of the huge numbers we're bringing into the country. We're going to be discussing that very shortly on the program, just the enormous numbers that are coming in. So that does pump up the figures, but when you look at it per capita and it's going backwards, even if it's a slight drop, that's got to be a concern. Now, before you go, I've got to ask you about the latest with Qatar Airways. The PM is facing fresh demands to explain what he knew when he knew it about blocking Qatar getting extra capacity into Australia. He said he was looks like he was blindsided by Transport Minister Catherine King, who made the call without his knowledge. Do we really believe that? Is that possible, that she would have done that without consulting the PM?
I think it is possible. But look, I think the problem is that there's just too much sidestepping by the PM and ministers on this issue. I mean, I broke today that Penny Wong's rung the Qatari PM. And I don't think I've had an explanation of why. You know, she mentioned the 2020 strip search incident, but not the air services agreement in the whole phone call. Surely the phone call is about the air services agreement, even if it's not explicitly said. I mean, you wouldn't mention this other incident otherwise. So what's the big secret? I do wonder, did the women who were subject to that strip search wrote to Catherine King saying, don't approve these flights, right? And they got a letter back from Catherine King saying, I haven't, in July. Is that the real reason the government did this? But they don't want to say the reason because it's not technically, legally, the reason you should give for refusing an air services agreement. That's what I'm starting to wonder today. The other thing I'm starting to wonder today, because of this Penny Wong phone call to Qatar Airways, to the Qatari PM, is are they going in a few months to let them have more flights? And my suspicion is yes. Because as I said on air today, Rita, I've had a Liberal MP tell me today they are getting calls about Qatar Airways, Qantas, Joyce and Albanese and their relationship, 2 electorate offices now. This issue is really biting out there. You throw this on the cost of living fire with people can't go and see their relatives, etc., and it's just become a lightning rod. And it's extraordinary how these issues blow up and politicians can't see them coming. So, look, I just think Albanese needs to clear the air. He needs to come out and say, this is what happened. Catherine King made this decision. She made it because of X, Y, Z. I agree with the decision. We can review it down the track. If you just get out there and get ahead of it instead of saying, silly opposition, silly journos, why are you asking questions? That's often the best way to cauterise the wound on these things, Rita.
I do wonder, though, whether it's too late for that, because Catherine King has given us, I think, 4 or 5 different reasons for this bewildering decision. So whichever one they're going to finally go with, it's still going to raise questions about then why did you say this and why did you say that? I mean, a little bit of transparency would be a fine thing. Andrew Clennell, thank you so much for your time.